Hey everybody, thank you so much for logging on to StateChampsNetwork.com. Could be watching this on YouTube as well. This is the first edition, the 2015 debut of The Buzz here on State Champs. My name is Lorne Plant, joined by Tom Markowski. Now, what we talk about very briefly on the television show this week is the fact that there is a public versus private concern.
Debate.
Yeah, debate, let's just say, where there are those who are very passionate that there should be a separate football tournament, as there is in some states. I'm not sure exactly what that number is, but where the public schools have their own championship and the private schools have their own. This happened to be kind of an anomaly year in the fact that 7 of the 8 championships in football this past school year, or this past fall, were won by Catholic teams, private schools. But if you look at just the last several years, in 2013, there were 5 public champions, 3 public or private champions. 2012, there were 4 public champions, 4 private champions. 2012, 5 public champions, 3 private champions. And in 2010 or 2011, there were 5 public and 3 private. So it seems to be that it's pretty even. This is just a weird year.
Well, percentage-wise, the number of public schools compared to private schools in the state is lopsided. I'll throw out a number. It's about 80% or 85% that are public, 15 to 20% are private. But that being said, it seems to me, and I have some figures here, and I don't want to get lost in them or bore you with these details, but since 1990, when the championships were increased from 4 to 8, I think you get a good look at the expanded playoffs, the more teams winning state titles. Since that time, the Division II Class A teams during that time, because it was AA that came in vogue and before the divisions came about, only 5 or 6 titles were won by private schools, which is not that many over let's say a 25-year span, and go up to the Division I Class AA division, and there was only 9 times was that won by a private school. No surprise here, that was Catholic Central.
Correct.
Now, it seems to me it's the larger divisions that not affected by this, where conversely it's the lower divisions, Division 6, where you had Ithaca, for example, winning 4 in a row until losing this year to Monroe St. Mary Catholic Central. It seems like those lower divisions are, how should I say, inundated with more private schools winning the titles. Now, there's a couple things that you could do here. One, I don't like the 2 separate tournament ideas. I think that takes away from the competitiveness of the playoffs, and it would also spread or divide the media attention between the 2 tournaments, which is not an ideal situation for us nor the football teams competing. Some states do have separate tournaments. There's about 6 or so throughout the country. So that's one solution for that, if you perceive this as a problem, is to separate it into 2. Or you could change the playoff format, which there's been some proposals there. You reward schools, programs who play a stronger schedule for getting into the playoffs. Does that mean that more public schools would have a better chance of winning? That would be all conjecture. There's nothing to really hang your hat on there. The solution I would like to see, and it would help, I believe, with more public schools having a chance of winning, especially at the lower divisions, is to create a formula that would prevent the domination by one school. Now let's go back in the recent past.
Yeah.
East Grand Rapids won 5 state titles in Division III. They were dominant. I mean, it seemed like they were playing St. Mary's every year.
They did.
And finally, St. Mary's broke through one year, and actually they won it this past year too. There are states such as Ohio that have formulas. If you, as a program, win so many titles, they bump you up a division. That's not a bad formula.
So, for instance, Brother Rice, they've won 3 in a row. They would have been bumped up to D1.
Would knock you up to D1. That's not a bad solution, and it would be for all schools. It would not really be limited to private. I have
certainly have seen some Division 8 schools, and some of those really dominant.
Sure, Crystal Falls Forest Park, for example. Granted, they didn't win a lot of tournament or state titles, but they seemed like, I think it was 6 years in a row in the D8 final. You've seen Traverse City Francis have a run of titles.
Obviously Ithaca
in East Grand Rapids, and in the in the day when Detroit DePorres was open, they would win a lot of titles too.
Farmington Harrison,
Right, there was a lot of schools that their names keep popping up. Now, if you really want to, and I don't think this would cause a problem with the private schools, to eliminate some of these advantages that you might perceive as the private schools, or maybe they're not so much of a perception, maybe they're a reality. But you also can see the open enrollment at a number of public schools and how they're growing too with their athletic teams. What I would propose is having all private schools play up a division. Meaning you'd have, let's say, Traverse City St. Francis, for example, is a Division 7 school. You bump them up to 6. Let's say you have Orchard Lake St. Mary competing in 3. They would compete in 2. Brother Rice there in 2, you would compete in Division 1. This would all be played out after the playoffs were determined, how many teams would get in, and then you would bump them up accordingly and, balance out the number of teams in each division. I think that would solve some problems. For one thing, you would definitely have a public school winning a Division 8 because there wouldn't be any privates, and it would increase the competitive level for those private schools having to play up one division.
Interesting.
I've had some complaints and some also people said, well, what do you do with Catholic Central? Well, there's not much you can do with Catholic Central. They're already in Division 1. They can't play in a higher division. You want to kick them out and send them to Ohio. See, there's this debate. Let's say, and we're just talking about football now.
Yes.
If you move them into volleyball, which would be kind of funny, I mean, not really realistic, is okay, we're just going to do it for football, but the other sports are fine. I think you'd have to do it across the board if that's what you really want, is the 2 tournaments. But be careful what you wish for in this situation. Now, there's the perception that the private schools do a lot of recruiting during the summers at the 8th grade level, 7th grade level, that they're coercing kids to come to their programs. With the open enrollment, don't be so blind to see that the public schools are doing that as well. If you want 2 different tournaments, private and public, those private schools probably won't be in the Michigan High School Athletic Association anymore. That is my thought. And talking to other people, that is probably a reality that would take place if you indeed have 2 separate tournaments. And then you're creating a larger animal here. Now they're not in the Michigan High School Athletic Association. Now they don't have to abide by the rules of the Michigan High School Athletic Association. If you think they're recruiting now, wait until you separate the 2 into private and public. The private schools will have a open card for them to go after students. So.
Right. This debate has gone on for a long time. So this is, in fact, a lot of this research Tom had done a few years ago.
Right.
And yet his paper decided they didn't want to run it.
Well, yeah, I had completed it. That I best, then that happens in newspapers sometimes.
Exactly.
We come out to an article is completed and we don't have room for it, or we don't like it, or whatever reason.
Right, sure.
But it was interesting on my part to when I interviewed people like Vic Michaels with the Detroit Catholic League and other people too throughout the state and what their thoughts were on the separate tournaments. A long time ago, when I say a long time ago, 15 to 20 years ago, there was a group in the Thumb that were, because there's so few private schools in the Thumb. In fact, I can't think of anyone in the Thumb at this point. Cardinal Mooney is the closest one, and not in the Thumb.
No.
But there's a group there that they were trying to get a proposal heard by the Michigan High School Athletic Association on have 2 separate tournaments, but it really didn't fly too far.
Right, exactly. And what has brought this up again, and we'll credit Mick McCabe of the Free Press for the blurb that he had talking about the fact that 7 of 8 private schools won the football state championship this past year. What he was also stating in there is the contention that is brewing, at least what was written, is that the Michigan High School Football Coaches Association didn't recognize the fact that 7 of the 8 football state champions were private schools, and the fact that none of those private schools that won were elected, their coaches of those teams were elected coaches of the year in those divisions, where you would think...
Yeah, they got snubbed.
You would think that there would be at least one. Maybe it's Paul Verska for Warren De La Salle.
He would have been a good choice, yes.
But certainly, that is up for debate, but I think the question is there an anger by the Football Coaches Association that they feel towards private?
Yeah, that might be, I would think, a kickback, some feedback from the Coaches Association. Okay, here's the 7 titles the private schools won. but we're not going to honor you. It's like, we're not happy with what took place. But, let's get back to what we said earlier. That was a different type of year. That normally doesn't happen, and we were pointing out that normally it's pretty well divided, and often, I would say more times than not, that the public schools do win more of the titles than the privates, but it was just a different year.
Right.
Muskegon, a lot of people thought they were the best team in 3. They didn't win it against St. Mary's. So,
should there have been some coaches that were voted Coach of the Year?
Oh, Versko. Without question.
Look at Monroe St. Mary Catholic Central.
Jack Jarmo did a great. Look at Jack too, and the accomplishment that they did. They've been to the finals for Jack, and there he is at Ford Field explaining how they didn't win the state championship, and this time they didn't have to do any explaining. This debate's going to go on and on. It's too bad that they were snubbed by the Coaches Association. Obviously, there's some ill will there.
Yeah. I think George Port had a great case for what Orchard Lake St. Mary's did this year, especially how impressively they beat Muskegon.
I'll tell you what, they were really good this year.
Really good.
They almost beat Brother Rice a couple
and again,
times.
In fairness, I do not have the list in front of me here who did take Coach of the Year. All those coaches, I'm sure, were deserving as well.
There's a lot of good coaches.
It's just kind of weird how it works out, and that's why we do here on the Buzz.